July 14, 1842. The Atlantic is screaming. You're trapped in a wooden box, the SS Great Western, and the air smells like wet dog mixed with 3-week-old cabbage. And something sharper, human. You need to go, like really go. But there's no porcelain, no flush, just a hemp rope dangling over the side, slick with salt and the remnants of the guy before you. And they called this progress? Wait, no, Victorian ingenuity. It's a miracle anyone survived without rotting from the inside. The year is 1840. Steam is the new magic, or so the newspapers claim. Everyone's obsessed with shrinking the world. But here's the thing they don't put in the fancy brochures. The world still smelled like a stagnant pond. Imagine you've just boarded. You're looking at the SS Great Western, or maybe the Britannia. From the pier, she's a queen. Inside, she's a damp basement that moves.
The first thing that hits you isn't the majesty of the ocean. It's the vibration. A constant, teeth-chattering shudder from the coal-fired heart of the beast. It's not a hum. It's a physical assault. It feels like your bones are slowly being ground into powder. And the coal smoke? It doesn't just blow away. It clings. It coats your throat in a fine, gritty velvet. You cough, and it comes up gray. Lovely. Wait, I should mention the light, or the lack of it. Once you descend below the main deck, sunlight becomes a rumor. You've got these pathetic little flickering oil lamps that smell like burnt fish and despair. They don't illuminate. They just make the shadows look like they're vibrating. Everything is slick. The walls, the handrails, your own skin, everything is covered in a thin film of condensation and salt. It's like being inside a giant metal throat.
If you're rich, I mean, truly, I own a factory, rich, you get a cabin. Dickens had one in 42. He called it a preposterous box. And he was right. It was a glorified shelf. But if you're steerage, forget it. You're packed in like salted herring, except the herring probably had more breathing room. You're sharing air with 300 strangers, and none of them have seen a bar of soap since Liverpool. The Victorian era sounds elegant until you realize hygiene was basically an experimental theory most people ignored. It was a fever dream of damp wool and unwashed bodies. And we haven't even gotten to the ropes yet. God, the ropes. Let's talk about the rope.
It wasn't for the sails, not this one. It was dangling off the side of the ship, tethered to the rail, dragging in the churning salt-gray wake of the Atlantic. It was thick, coarse hemp. Now, imagine you're a clerk from Manchester or a seamstress from London. You've got the flux, that's 1840s talk for my insides are turning into liquid. You scramble to the head. That's not a room, it's a literal hole in the floorboards at the very front of the ship. Why the front? Because the engineers, in all their infinite wisdom, figured the wind would blow the smell away from the fancy passengers. It didn't. It just recycled it. You're crouching over this hole, the freezing Atlantic spray hitting your bare skin, looking down at the churning abyss. And when you're done, no paper, no leaves, no sponge. You pull up the rope. The tow rag. It's been soaking in the ocean, which, sure, salt is a disinfectant, but it's also been used by 300 other people this morning. It's wet, it's abrasive, it's communal. You wipe, you drop it back in the water, and you hope the salt kills the cholera before the next guy pulls it up. It's a miracle anyone's skin didn't just peel off from the friction alone. But honestly, the rope was the clean part. The real horror was under your feet, the bilge. Victorian ships were built to look like triumphs of the industrial age, but they were basically leaky wooden tubs with a steam engine bolted on as an afterthought. Every ship leaked, every single one. Seawater seeped through the seams, mixing with the slop, which is a polite way of saying the overflow from the buckets in steerage. This cocktail of salt water, human waste, spilled coal dust, and dead rats collected in the very bottom of the hull. The bilge water.
It smelled like a sulfur mine had sex with a sewer. And because the ventilation was non-existent, literally just a few holes in the deck that they'd cover with tarps the second the weather got rough, that smell stayed. It lived with you. It became part of your clothes. You'd wake up on a Tuesday in April and your wool coat would feel heavy, not just with dampness, but with the accumulated stench of 1,000 unwashed lives. Wait, if you're enjoying this descent into the damp, miserable reality of history, hit the subscribe button. I'm Cole. I talk about the stuff your history teacher was too polite to mention. Join the Diary of Cole crew. Or don't. I'm not your dad. Let's get into the medicine, or the lack thereof. In 1840, we were still 12 years away from John Snow figuring out that cholera came from water, not bad air. The doctors on these ships? They believed in miasma. The idea that if it smells bad, it makes you sick. Which, considering how bad it smelled, meant everyone should have been dead by day 3. If you got sick, and you would get sick, you went to see the ship's surgeon. This guy usually wasn't a top-tier London specialist. He was usually a guy who failed his exams or had a drinking problem and needed to disappear for a few months. His kit? A rusty lancet for bloodletting, because clearly you have too much blood, that's the problem, and a bottle of laudanum. Laudanum was the Victorian answer to everything. Broken leg? Opium. Seasickness? Opium. Existential dread? More opium. But it didn't stop the typhus. They called it ship fever. It was spread by lice. And in steerage, lice were the only things living the high life. You're packed into these wooden bunks, 6 inches of space between your face and the guy above you. He's sweating. You're breathing in his breath. The lice are migrating from his wool blanket to yours like a tiny, itchy invasion force. Within a week, half the deck is shivering, their skin turning a mottled, grayish purple. And the food. Oh God, the food. Forget the captain's table. If you weren't in first class, you were eating hardtack. It's a biscuit made of flour and water, baked until it has the structural integrity of a brick. You couldn't bite it. You'd break a tooth. You had to soak it in your coffee, which was actually burnt chicory and grit, until it softened enough to swallow. But here's the fun part. The weevils. Hardtack was a breeding ground. You'd break open a biscuit and see these little black heads wiggling. The veterans, the sailors who'd been doing this for years, they'd wait until dark to eat so they couldn't see the bugs. Or they'd tap the biscuit on the table to shake the larvae out. It was a rhythmic sound at dinner. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of 100 people trying to evict their protein before they ate their carbs. The salt beef wasn't better. They kept it in barrels for months. By the time it got to your tin plate, it was a piece of mahogany-colored gristle that tasted like a salt mine and despair. It was so tough that sailors used to carve the leftovers into buttons or small trinkets. You're literally eating something you could use to repair a coat. The engineering of these ships completely ignored the human element. They obsessed over the indicated horsepower
and the diameter of the paddle wheels. They built these massive 200-foot iron hulls, but forgot that humans need to, breathe. The air in the lower decks was vitiated. That's the fancy 1840s word for carbon dioxide poisoning. People would faint just from the lack of oxygen, falling into the slop on the floor. It wasn't a voyage. It was a survival experiment conducted by people who thought bathing was a dangerous hobby. You weren't crossing the Atlantic. You were being fermented in a giant metal, steam-powered jar. And all the while, the tow rope was waiting outside, dragging through the waves, getting ready for the next person who dared to have a digestive system. It's a wonder the New World got populated at all. I would have seen the rope and just stayed in Liverpool. Honestly, is the American dream really worth a communal hemp wipe? Maybe not. Maybe that's why everyone in those old photos looks so incredibly pissed off. They weren't stoic. They were just constipated and covered in coal dust. Then the vibrations changed. Or maybe it was just the screaming. July 14th, mid-Atlantic. The air turned thick. Not just humid, heavy. Like you were inhaling a damp wool coat that had been left in a gutter. It wasn't a slow build. It was a fuse. One man, a tailor from Bristol in bunk 42, starts clutching his stomach. His skin doesn't just go pale, it turns this haunting, bruised indigo. The blue stage. That's when you know you're cooked. Cholera doesn't knock. It breaks the door down. Suddenly the floor starts moving. Not from the waves, from the rice water. That's the Victorian medical term for the fluid leaving bodies faster than they can drink. It's a flood, in the pitch black, below the waterline. The tow rope? Forget the rope. Nobody can walk. Nobody can even stand. They're just sliding across the iron deck in a slurry of their own dissolved organs. The smell. God, the smell isn't just filth anymore. It's metallic. It's ammonia. It's the smell of a body turning itself inside out while the steam engine screams overhead. Pistons slamming. Clang, hiss, clang. It's the rhythm of a factory, but the product is corpses. Wait, the captain. He's locked the steerage doors. Of course he has. For the safety of the cabin passengers. The people upstairs are eating smoked salmon and playing whist, while 30 feet below, 50 humans are liquefying in the dark. It's a pressurized cooker of meat and bacteria. 100 degrees, 100% humidity. You're breathing the steam from someone else's dying lungs. The paddle wheels are churning Atlantic salt into the wounds of the sick. There is no away. There is no outside. Just the wood, the iron, and the leak. The stuff from the ropes, the pressure, the seals on these Victorian death traps were a joke. It seeped back in, a closed loop of biological collapse. The rope is still there, trailing in the wake, useless. A hemp thread in a sea of bile. We aren't travelers anymore. We're just cargo that's gone sour. Total silence from the top deck. Just the thump, thump of the engine. Like a heartbeat for a ghost ship. Look, I'm staring at my own kitchen floor right now, and I feel like I need to scrub it with bleach, just in case. Could you do it? Honestly? Trading the soot of a London slum for a 6-week ticket to a floating coffin, just for a shot at a farm in Ohio? I'd take my chances with the soot. Which bit of this Victorian rot actually turned your stomach? The rice water slurry? The useless rope? Tell me below. Subscribe for history without the polish. Wash your hands. Seriously.